What is a Series I savings bond? This is a question that I've been getting over and over again, so I just wanted to get on here and explain it to you guys because it's a very interesting project that the government is working on, and they're actually attempting to outpace inflation, or attempting to help you outpace inflation. So basically what happens is you purchase this bond and it pays you an interest rate. Whenever the government needs money, they basically sell these things called bonds. And when they sell these bonds, you give the government, the United States government, money, and they pay you an interest rate that's attached to that bond. Now, interest rates for bonds are usually pretty bad. They're not that great. I mean, of course, they're still better than a savings account at the bank. However, they're not that great. And I personally do not invest in bonds. However, many people do. There are many people in the United States today that invest in bonds because they want just a guaranteed return. The government backs their bonds with their government guarantee. So you're literally going into contract, so to speak, with the government, and they're promising to pay you your money back plus interest, which is a pretty cool position to be in, of course, if you're making a good interest rate. So let's go ahead and talk about the Series I savings bonds. So the way that it works is it's a composite interest rate, which means that it's not just consisting of one piece. There is a fixed base rate, and then there's also a rate that changes based on the consumer price index. We have a 0% fixed rate. Okay, so keep that in mind. It's 0%. If all else fails, you could make zero. But now with the composite rate, they're offering at this moment to pay 9.62%, which is pretty nice actually. 10% a year guaranteed by the United States government. It's not all that bad. Keep in mind that it really depends on when you purchase your bond, because that interest rate resets every 6 months. When the CPI data comes out every 6 months, that interest rate could reset. So we had some interesting things happening in the United States government, in our economy. Basically, these Series I savings bonds were not paying anything. And so this could literally happen again. However, that attractive 9.62% is getting a lot of people. They're like, man, I could just give some money to the government and be rich. Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you. You actually will not be rich off of this. And the reason is that the government caps you at how much money you can invest into these bonds, and they cap you at $10,000. What a joke. Okay, the most I could possibly invest into this bond is $10,000. Well, actually, they give you a maximum of 15, but they make it very hard. Let's go ahead and talk about the first way to invest into these bonds, and that's through Treasury Direct. So treasurydirect.gov. If you go to that website, you basically have to create an account, you give them your banking information, and you start electronically investing into these bonds. And the limit for that, again, is $10,000. For married couples, it's $20,000. So $10,000 each. However, this is the extremely hard way to do it. But basically, if you wanted to invest an additional $5,000 each, what you could do is have part of your tax refund go towards purchasing $5,000 of that bond. Again, you're maxing out at like $15K per person. So for a married couple, it's $30K. If you're making 9.62%, you're not even making $3,000. It may be a cool way to diversify your portfolio a little bit, but there's definitely things that are paying a lot more than that in today's market, especially with the way the economy has been moving. And it's opened a lot of opportunities for us. We've seen so many changes, and whenever there are changes, there are opportunities for us to create a profit. So as investors, one of the biggest things that we want to do is solve problems for people. If you're able to solve problems for people with your investments are going to pay you a lot of money. If you are able to invest into something, a system, a product, a service that's solving problems for other people, that's one of the best investments to be in, because you're not basing your investment on the market or whatever is going on in the market. You're basing your investment on your product or your service's ability to solve problems for people and then provide some sort of return for you. That's a very safe way to invest because it allows you to service a need. You see a market need, you meet that need, and then there's a reward that happens after that. Many different industries so many opportunities in the market at this time that honestly, you don't even need to think about bonds, and you don't even need to think about Series I savings bonds and all these different things. It may be beneficial for sure. It's some extra income. It's safe. It's guaranteed. However, you're not guaranteed to make a return. By law, the interest rate cannot go negative, which means you would have to pay money for the bond, but it can go down to zero because remember, it's a composite rate, which means that every 6 months, that inflation rate resets based on CPI data. And then the fixed rate that we have attached to this bond is zero. So if the fixed rate is zero and then new CPI data comes out, let's say the inflation rate is negative. Okay, well, technically your return cannot be negative on this bond. You can't pay to have this bond. However, it can go down to zero. So if your base rate is zero, your fixed rate is zero, and your variable rate is zero, the total of your composite interest rate is still zero, which means that you're not making money in that situation. And so you're basically letting the government use your money for free for whatever they want. And then eventually, at the end of the day, you're getting a zero interest rate. There are also some other downsides to Series I savings bonds. So if you do end up investing, there are some rules. One of the biggest downsides is that your money is locked up for a minimum of 1 year. Basically, if you invest today, you can't touch your money for a whole year. You can't do anything. There's absolutely no way to touch your money for 1 year. After a year, it gets a little bit easier, but if you withdraw within the first 5 years, they're gonna penalize you and they're gonna take away the last 3 months of interest from your payout. So if you do that within the first 5 years, if you're planning to keep it in there for more than 5 years, that's great. But if you're planning to pull it out within 5 years, so maybe 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, whatever, you're gonna lose the last 3 months of interest. So whatever the interest rate was at that time, you're gonna lose that interest and you're gonna be able to pull out the rest. So that's another downside to Series I savings bonds. There are some benefits. They're not taxed locally, right? So there's no local tax that applies to it. There is federal income tax that applies to it. However, you can defer that to when the note actually matures. You can reinvest this, right? So it's not something that's super dangerous in tax department. There's definitely workarounds and ways that you can leverage this investment and potentially maybe even reinvest it into something. I would highly recommend talking to your tax professional and finding out what the best strategy for you specifically is. With a 9.62% return, do I think that's going to continue? I think that, maybe for the next year or two, we could see a similar inflation rate, but eventually it's going to have to slow down. That's just my opinion, by the way. I don't think that it's going to continue in such a crazy aggressive growth pattern. I think it's going to slow down a little bit. And so that obviously would reduce the amount of returns that you're making with these Series I savings bonds. So they may seem attractive right now, today, in 6 months. Who knows? They may not be attractive at all. Hope this explanation was super helpful for you guys. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next video.